My mother stopped answering my calls in March. Not gradually, just gone, between 1 week and the next. I called her 19 times over 4 months. She never picked up once. The day I drove 45 minutes north to her place in Barrie, my brother answered the door. He didn't open it all the way. He stood in the gap, one shoulder against the frame, the way you stand when you're making a point without saying it out loud. Behind him I could hear the television, the noon news on CBC, and I heard my mother cough once from somewhere inside the house. "She's resting," he said. I just heard her. He let out a long breath, the kind that says you've asked a stupid question. "She doesn't want visitors. I handle things for her now." I said, "Okay." I turned around. I walked back to my truck. But I didn't go home. I drove to the Tim Hortons on Bayfield, and I sat in the parking lot for a while with my hands on the steering wheel. Then I made one phone call. 6 weeks after that call, something came out in front of 60 people at a Legion dinner that my brother never saw coming. It had been in plain sight for 8 months. Anyone in that house could have seen it, if they'd been willing to look. I want to be honest about what I missed and how long I missed it, because none of what happened next makes any sense unless you understand that first. My name is Curtis Beaumont. I'm 53 years old. I run a licensed home inspection practice out of Barrie, Ontario. Have done for 18 years. If you've bought a house in this part of the province and hired an inspector, there's a reasonable chance I was the one crawling through your attic. The job teaches you to notice things. Hairline cracks in the foundation, water staining behind fresh drywall, the kind of damage that hides behind a coat of paint. You learn to read a building the way some people read a face. Not what it's showing you, but what it's working to conceal. I should have been better at this. That's what I have to live with. My mother's name is Evelyn. She's 77. She spent 31 years as a public librarian before she retired, and she is the sharpest, most patient, most quietly stubborn woman I have ever known. In January, she had a TIA, a transient ischemic attack, a mini-stroke. She was in the hospital 4 days and came home with new medication and a follow-up schedule with her neurologist. And my brother Sean was already installed in her spare bedroom by the time she crossed the threshold. Sean is 4 years younger than me. He runs a landscaping company, or he did. We were close when we were kids and stopped being close somewhere in our 30s, and neither of us was able to say exactly when. The distance was never one fight. It was 100 small things left unsaid until the gap became the default. After Mom's TIA, Sean called me. Said he'd stay through the recovery. He was 20 minutes closer, his winter schedule was lighter. I said it sounded reasonable. I told him to keep me in the loop. He said he would. He never did. The calls started going to voicemail in March. The first few times I didn't think much of it. She napped more since the TIA. Her processing speed had slowed. She'd said so herself. Back in February, the way she described everything. Matter-of-factly, like reading a reference card. "It takes me a moment longer to find words, Curtis. Like searching for a book that's been reshelved. But by April, I was calling twice a week and getting nothing. I left messages. I texted. My sister-in-law sent one back. She's been tired. Please don't overwhelm her. A second one 3 weeks later. She's asked not to be disturbed. We're respecting that." I arrived at Mom's front door in July with a bag. The loose-leaf Earl Grey she'd ordered from the tea shop on Dunlop since 1994, and a new large-print crossword collection, the Tuesday through Thursday difficulty she preferred. My brother opened the door and told me she didn't want visitors. I set the bag on the porch railing. I turned and walked back to the truck. Before I reached the end of the driveway, I heard it hit the bottom of the recycling bin. I sat behind the wheel for a moment. Then I opened the glove compartment and pulled out a yellow legal pad. I keep one in every vehicle, 18 years of writing down what I observe before I forget it. Because details matter and memory lies. I turned to a blank page and I started writing. July 11th, turned away at door, heard her cough. Brother says he handles things for her now. Bag in the bin. Then I went further back and started counting. 19 calls, 7 voicemails, 2 texts received from sister-in-law, not from Mom. Last call Mom actually answered February 28th. That call had been 20 minutes. I'd been between jobs, parked outside a Canadian Tire. We talked about the grandkids, my business, and at the very end she'd said something I hadn't thought about much since. Almost as an afterthought. "Curtis, you still know where the Muskoka key is, right? The one for the cabin?" I told her I did, on a hook in my garage beside the fuse panel, Same place I'd kept it for a decade. She'd given it to me when Dad got sick in case of emergencies. She said, "Good, don't lose it." And then the conversation moved on. Standing in the Tim Hortons parking lot, I wrote it down. February 28th, last call. She asked about the Muskoka key. I didn't know what it meant yet, but I've been an inspector long enough to know that the detail you don't understand is usually the one that matters most. There's something I need to tell you before I go any further, because without it the rest of this won't fully make sense. My father died 3 years ago, lung cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to the end. He died on a Thursday morning in October. I was in Sudbury, 4 hours away, in the middle of a multi-unit inspection for a condo conversion. 7 units, report due by end of week, a job I needed. I made it back by evening, 2 hours after they moved him. My brother was there when I walked in. He didn't say anything that night. But over the years he found ways to bring it up, not always directly. Sometimes a comment, sometimes just a look across the table at a family dinner. "You know where I was when Dad went, Curtis?" "Right there." I was right there. He wasn't wrong, he was there and I wasn't. That's a fact I've carried and I'm not going to dress it up. But here's what it did. Every time things got difficult between us, every time I pushed back on a decision about Mom's care, some part of me stood down. Because Sean had been there and I hadn't, and that's a hard thing to think yourself around. I was standing in my kitchen that July night, with the legal pad open on the table, when I understood how long I'd let that stop me. All the calls I'd almost made and didn't. All the times I told myself Sean was handling it. All the times I'd let a dead man's last hour keep me from my living mother. That was my fault. I'm putting it there and leaving it. My daughter called me 2 evenings after I got turned away from the door. She's 26, works as a paramedic with County Simcoe, and she has the particular quality of saying the hardest things in the quietest voice. She told me to open Instagram and go to my sister-in-law's page. There was a photo from 4 days earlier. Caption, "Beautiful Sunday with the best mother-in-law." Heart emoji. Mom was sitting on the living room sofa, hands folded in her lap, smiling at the camera. "Look at her left arm," my daughter said. "Zoom in on the wrist." I spread my fingers on the screen. Mom's sleeve, a light cotton shirt, had shifted at the cuff. There was something there, a shadow, or something more than a shadow. "What is that?" I asked. My daughter was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, it was in the voice she uses when she's working. Flat, clear, no extra weight. "I can't say for certain from a photo. It could be bruising from her blood thinner, or it might not be." A pause. "Look at her collarbone. Compare it to Christmas." I pulled up the Christmas photos on my phone, held both screens side by side. Mom had always been a slight woman, but the hollow above her collarbone was different now. Deeper. Like something had settled inward. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I called Sylvia. She's lived 3 doors down from Mom for 26 years. Retired from 18 years in emergency medicine before that, and she is the kind of person who notices everything and says nothing until she's asked directly. I asked directly. She told me she hadn't seen Mom in the yard since April. Mom used to garden every morning, out with her coffee, deadheading the hostas, checking the tomatoes along the back fence. It had stopped in the spring. Sylvia had rung the doorbell twice. The first time my brother said Mom was sleeping. The second time he came all the way out to the sidewalk, not the porch, the sidewalk, and told her very calmly to stay out of their family's business. "I called the seniors' safety line in June," Sylvia said. "They sent a worker." I went still. "What happened?" "Your mother told them she was fine." A silence. "She told them she was comfortable, well cared for, and didn't need any follow-up." Sylvia paused. "Curtis, I was a mandated reporter for 18 years. I know what I saw through that screen door. But if your mother tells the worker she's fine and she has capacity, there's nothing anyone can do." I asked her why Mom would say she was fine. Sylvia was quiet. Then, very carefully, "That's what I've been asking myself since June." I hung up and wrote one line on the legal pad. "June, check visit. Mom said fine. Why?" That evening I pulled up the property tax records for Mom's address. Force of habit. I'd done it once before when she asked about her assessment. Then I checked Realtor.ca. The house was listed. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, mature lot, motivated seller. The listing had been live 11 days. The interior photos showed an empty living room, furniture gone, bookshelves bare, the framed family photos that had been on the mantle since 1993 completely cleared. The listing agent was my sister-in-law. I hadn't known she had her license. She'd gotten it in 2022. I called the number on the listing. She answered on the second ring, professional, pleasant. I said I'd seen the listing on Pringle Drive, and could she tell me about the situation? Of course. The homeowner is transitioning to a care facility. The family's hoping for a quick close, very motivated. I thanked her and ended the call. I sat at my kitchen table, then I opened the legal pad, transitioning to care facility. Mom never mentioned this, not once, I underlined it twice. I had the senior's safety line number saved on my phone. I'd looked it up 3 times in the past week, and closed the screen each time. I always had a reason. Give it another day. Maybe I'm reading this wrong. He's still my brother. I called. The intake worker was thorough. I read from the legal pad, dates, call counts, the photo, the mark on the wrist, the house listing, my sister-in-law as the listing agent. The neighbor turned away at the sidewalk. At the end, the worker said, "Sir, I want to be clear about something. If your mother has legal capacity and tells our worker she's safe and satisfied with her arrangements, we cannot compel any change. The law protects her right to make her own decisions." I said I understood. I'm not asking you to remove her from the home. I'm asking you to give her a chance to be heard when my brother isn't standing in the same room. A pause, typing. We'll schedule a visit within 10 business days. I wrote the date in the legal pad. Then I wrote, can't guarantee Sean won't be there. 7 days later, Scott called me. We'd played in the same men's hockey league for 12 years. Not close exactly, but the kind of connection that exists in small cities, where everyone knows everyone, and that counts for something. He was a constable with Barrie PD now. He'd been assigned to accompany the worker on the follow-up visit, and called me the night before, out of professional courtesy, to tell me I couldn't be on scene. I know, I said. And I can only look at what's in plain view. I can't search anything. I understand, I said. When you're in there, look at her wrists. Look at how she's dressed. My daughter saw something in a photo. A pause. What am I looking at? I don't know exactly. That's the problem. Okay, he said. I'll look. He called me at 8:30 the next evening. I was on the back step with the legal pad. I picked up on the first ring, and he talked for about 12 minutes. The house was clean. Fresh flowers on the kitchen table. A fruit bowl on the counter. Oranges. A couple of apples. The kind of arrangement you put out when you've had 90 minutes of notice, and you want the place to read a certain way. Mom was in the armchair in the living room, hair done, wearing a long-sleeved cardigan buttoned to both wrists, despite the temperature outside being 24 degrees. She answered every question clearly. Was she safe? Yes. Was she free to contact whoever she wanted? Yes. Was anyone preventing her from doing anything? No. My brother had stood in the hallway for the entire interview, not close enough to interrupt, just there, just visible. She looked thin, Scott said, but she wasn't in distress, not that I could see. I closed my eyes. Curtis, he said. When we were leaving, she looked at me and said, completely easy, say hello to your dad. I hope that knee has healed up properly. I sat up. Scott's father had had knee surgery 9 years ago. He'd passed away in 2019. His mother still came to Mom's old book club. My mother had attended the funeral. She'd brought a casserole. She and Scott's mother had known each other for years. My mother knew Scott's father was gone. Scott said very quietly, Curtis, your mom is not confused. She made a mistake on purpose. I picked up the pen. I wrote, she's still there. She's still trying. My daughter drove over the next morning. We sat at the kitchen table with the legal pad between us. She walked me through it the way she talks to patients' families when she needs them to hear something clearly and stay calm while they hear it. Grandma's residual effects from the TI are word retrieval, she said. Finding names, she's told us that herself, that's real. But her long-term memory, her orientation, her social awareness, those are intact. She knew who Scott was. She knew his father's name. She wasn't confused. She was giving you a signal. She set her phone down. She's saying, I'm still in here. Someone with a reason to listen, please listen. I went back to February 28th in my mind, the Muskoka key. I went out to the garage. On the pegboard beside the fuse panel, there was a hook with 3 keys. The cabin key was the third one, dull brass, a little worn, with a strip of orange electrical tape my father had put on it years ago so it wouldn't get mixed up with the others. I stood there holding it, then I put it back on the hook. I have the key. I told my daughter when I came back in, I'm not going. She looked at me. Why not? Because if I show up uninvited, I become exactly what Sean has been calling me. And Mom pays for that. 10 days later, a registered letter arrived from a law firm in Barrie I didn't recognize. It was a court filing. My brother had applied to be appointed my mother's statutory guardian under the Substitute Decisions Act. The grounds: cognitive impairment following a TIA, inability to manage her own financial affairs, failure of other family members to engage in her care during the preceding 7 months. That last line, 7 months of enforced silence being used as evidence that I hadn't cared enough to show up. The physician affidavit attached was from a doctor who had seen Mom once. A 15-minute capacity assessment in April. 1 visit, 1 signature. I opened the legal pad to a clean page. I wrote, court date is 9 weeks out. Sean doesn't need to win. He just needs me to stay quiet 9 more weeks. I asked my brother to meet me. I picked the Tim Hortons on Dunlop. Public, neutral. He came in 11 minutes late. He ordered a large double-double and sat across from me with the expression he'd had since we were children. The one that says he's already tired of you before you've started. I had the legal pad open. I went through it the way I'd go through an inspection report. Methodically, without raising my voice. I told him I wasn't there to fight. I wanted to visit our mother. He could be present the entire time. I just wanted to see her. He set his coffee down. He reached into his jacket and took out his phone. He tapped the screen and held it across the table, speaker facing me. Mom's voice, clear as anything. I'm just fine, sweetheart. Don't let him worry you. I recognized her voice immediately. Every syllable, I went still. When is that from? I asked. Half a beat too long before he answered. Last week. She mentions the Leafs game against the Senators, I said. That was in March. He pulled the phone back. The silence between us lasted about 6 seconds, long enough to mean something. He stood up, left $2 on the table. At the door he turned around. You know what your problem is, Curtis? You're always somewhere else when it matters. You were somewhere else when Dad died. You're somewhere else now. If you contact that line again, I'll go to my lawyer and I'll make sure the court understands exactly what kind of son you've been. He walked out. I sat there with his $2 and a cold coffee and the legal pad open on the table. Sylvia called me on a Thursday evening. She'd been reading the Barrie Examiner, the print edition, which she still received, and read from the first page to the last. There's something in here you need to hear, she said. I'm going to read it to you. The local branch of the Royal Canadian Legion was holding its annual Remembrance Dinner, a fundraising and recognition evening. One item on the program, the branch was formally naming their reading room after the late Kenneth Beaumont, Sergeant, Seaforth Highlanders, my father, a Legion member and past branch executive. The event was in 3 weeks. Saturday evening, Legion Hall on Maple Avenue, 60-person seated dinner, live-streamed on the branch Facebook page. And then Sylvia read me the final line of the notice slowly, like she knew I needed each word separately. Mrs. Evelyn Beaumont, widow of the honoree, will be in attendance to officially dedicate the room in her late husband's name. I asked her to read it one more time. I understood exactly what my brother had arranged. A public ceremony, the whole community watching, a live stream, and my mother at a podium accepting an honor for my father's memory. He'd made himself her caretaker in the most respectable setting possible. He was going to stand in that hall and be seen doing exactly what he'd claimed all along. And he was going to put a microphone in front of her to prove it. And he had arranged for her to be the one to hand it to him. I started making plans before I put the phone down. I did 3 things, all of them on public record. First, I filed a motion to be recognized as an interested person in the guardianship application. As her adult son, I had standing. The court granted it in 5 days. As part of that filing, I requested the appointment of an independent capacity assessor, a neutral professional assigned by the court to evaluate my mother's actual wishes and cognitive status, separate from anything Sean or I said. Second, I bought a ticket to the Legion dinner, $40. I registered under my full name, Curtis James Beaumont. I wanted Sean to know I was coming. Third, I wrote my mother a letter and sent it registered mail, return receipt requested, not because Sean couldn't intercept it, he probably could, but a registered letter creates a postmark. It creates a record of when I tried. 3 sentences. That was all. I still have the Muskoka key. I'm not going to use it. I'll wait for you to open the door. My daughter called that night. She wanted to come to the dinner. I told her she didn't have to. She said, "I'm not coming for Uncle Sean. I'm coming so Grandma can see two people in that room who belong to her." I told her to wear something nice. The court appointed an independent capacity assessor, Dr. Wendy Park, 22 years of experience doing exactly this kind of work in Ontario. She visited Mom at the house. Sean was present, as he had the legal right to be. The assessment lasted 45 minutes. Her report came through the court file 3 pages long. I read it twice. Mrs. Beaumont presented as oriented, coherent, and able to articulate her own preferences clearly. She expressed satisfaction with her current living arrangements and indicated no concerns about her care. I set the report down. Then I read the final paragraph under additional observations. The assessor noted that the subject wore a long-sleeved garment throughout the interview, buttoned at both wrists, despite ambient temperature of 24 degrees Celsius. When offered the opportunity to remove her outer layer, the subject declined. That one line. I called Dr. Park's office. She picked up herself. I introduced myself and said very directly, "I'm not asking you to take my side. I'm asking one thing. Would you be willing to attend a community event this Saturday as a private citizen and simply observe?" She asked what event. I told her about the Legion dinner, the room dedication, the fact that my mother would be at a podium with a microphone, and 60 people in the room. A long pause. "Mr. Beaumont," she said, "what exactly are you planning to do?" I told her I was going to ask my mother one question in front of 60 people. Another silence. When she spoke again, her voice was measured and careful. "You understand what's at stake. If you create a scene, if you give your brother's lawyer anything to work with, the guardianship hearing becomes a different conversation. A judge looking at an open family conflict sometimes hands authority to whoever seems most stable. I understand that. Tell me the question." I told her. I'm not going to repeat it here, not yet. I told her what I told everyone who asked. There's only one place that question has any real weight, and it isn't in a phone conversation or a kitchen or a legal filing. It needs to land in that specific room, in that specific moment, with the right person standing at that microphone. If I say it anywhere else, it sounds like nothing. Dr. Park was quiet for a long time. "You're not going to accuse him of anything?" "No." "You're not going to present evidence or make a speech?" "No. I'm going to raise my hand and ask one question, that's all." I heard her pen tap against something twice. "I'll be in the back row," she said. The Legion Hall on Maples seats about 60 in folding metal chairs. The ceilings are low. The lighting is fluorescent. The walls are paneled and hung with photographs going back to 1942. Veterans in uniform, Remembrance Day services, branch executives across 5 decades. It smells like institutional coffee and the butter icing on a sheet cake someone had set up on a table near the entrance. We arrived at 6:40. My daughter wore a dark blazer and looked steadier than I felt. Row 4, aisle seats. I could see the full platform from there. A low stage, a standing microphone, a framed photograph of my father in his uniform displayed on an easel beside the podium. I scanned the room without looking like I was scanning. Sylvia was 2 rows back. She gave me a small nod when our eyes met. At the back of the room against the wall, a woman in a gray blazer with a notepad on her knee. Dr. Park. At the front table, the branch president, Sean, my sister-in-law, and my mother. Mom was in the first chair, closest to the aisle. She was wearing a pale blue cardigan, buttoned to both wrists, in a room that was at least 20 degrees. Then she turned her head, not looking for anyone, just taking in the room the way people do at events like this. Her eyes found me in row 4, and my mother, who had not spoken to me in 7 months, smiled. Just barely, just for a moment, but it was there. The program started at 7. The branch president gave brief remarks. A member read the citation for the dedication. Then my brother took the microphone. I'll give him this. He was good at it. He had the room from his first sentence. He spoke about Dad, real memories, details only family would know. He talked about Mom's recovery, the sleep he'd lost, the contracts he'd deferred. The room believed him because he delivered it like he believed it himself, or had convinced himself of it somewhere along the way. Then, without using my name, he said, "Some people are easy to find when there might be something to gain. They're a lot harder to find when someone actually needs them." He paused just long enough for a few people to glance toward row 4. Then he shook his head, like the thought wasn't worth finishing, and moved on. My daughter's hand found my arm. I put my hand over hers and didn't move. He built toward his close. And now I'd like to introduce the most important person in my life, the woman who made our father who he was. He extended his hand toward the front table. Mom. The room began applauding before she even stood. My sister-in-law rose to help her. Mom accepted, steadied herself, and walked to the stage. 3 steps up the railing. The room kept clapping. She took the microphone. She looked out at the room. She didn't say anything. The applause faded. 5 seconds. 7. Someone near the back coughed. My sister-in-law shifted in her chair and began to rise. I stood up. I didn't step forward. I raised my hand the way you do in a meeting when you want to be recognized. The branch president looked at me, uncertain. Do you have a... I have one question, I said, for the presenter. The room went still in that specific way. Rooms go still when something unplanned is happening, and no one is sure yet whether it's going to be awkward or serious. I stepped into the aisle. I stood 3 meters from the stage, and I looked at my mother, not at Sean, not at the room, at her. Mom, my voice was level. Is there anyone in this room preventing you from speaking freely? 7 seconds, I counted them. She looked at Sean. He was very still. His expression was controlled. Not threatening, not anything you could point to. Just there, just present. Then my mother set the microphone on the podium. She reached up with her left hand, and she pulled back her sleeve. The room saw it before anyone spoke. A reddened band around her wrist, maybe 3 fingers wide, running in a complete circle around the joint. The skin calloused at the edges the way it gets when something presses against it for weeks at a time. Not a bruise from blood thinners, a pattern. Someone behind me inhaled. A chair shifted somewhere. My mother pulled the sleeve back down. She picked up the microphone with the practiced calm of a woman who had spent 3 decades speaking to rooms full of people who weren't sure they wanted to listen. My name is Evelyn Beaumont, she said. I'm 77 years old. A lot of you borrowed library books from me growing up and came back 3 weeks late and pretended you'd forgotten. I remember most of you. Nobody laughed. They were waiting. My son asked if anyone was preventing me from speaking. The answer is yes, someone has been. The room was completely silent. In February, I signed a document. I was 8 days out of the hospital, still adjusting to my medication, still frightened. I didn't read it carefully enough. That's my own fault. I want to be clear about that. She took a breath. Since then, I haven't been permitted to answer my own phone. I haven't been allowed outside alone. 3 mornings a week when my son leaves for work, I'm secured in my chair so I don't fall. She said it the same way she would have read a catalog entry. He tells me it's for my safety. I think he tells himself that too. She looked at Sean. You could have told me about the money. I would have helped you. But you took my phone, Sean. You took my mornings. You took 7 months of my life. She put her hand flat on the podium. You can't give those back. My sister-in-law stood up. She's confused. She doesn't understand. Monica. Mom's voice through the microphone, quiet and absolute. Last month you asked me for the password to my online banking. You said it was to set up a shared account for household expenses. I gave it to you because I was tired and because I trusted you. I remember what day that was. I remember what I was wearing. Would you like me to continue? My sister-in-law sat down. Dr. Park was already on her feet at the back of the room. She introduced herself by name, her professional role, her appointment by the court, the active guardianship file she reported to. 60 chairs, 60 people turning. The room made that particular low sound a crowd makes when it's recalibrating to something it wasn't prepared for. The branch president was on his phone. The man in row 1 who'd been live streaming had his elbow up, the red light still blinking. The viewer count was climbing. I didn't see Sean move at first. When I looked toward the front table, he was still in his chair, hands flat on the tablecloth, staring at the center of it. And I understood, watching him, that some part of him had known this moment was possible. That he'd kept moving forward anyway because the alternative, admitting the truth, asking for help, had seemed like the worst option at every step along the way. It almost always does, until it isn't anymore. He didn't run. He didn't argue or deflect or demand that everyone calm down. He pushed back his chair and walked to the stage steps, climbed them slowly, stood at the microphone and looked at Mom. Then he went down on one knee, not for the room, not staged, The way a person kneels when the energy to stay standing finally runs out. $62,000, he said. His voice was barely holding together. The company's been underwater for 2 years. 6 guys on payroll I can't make right. I kept thinking I'd get ahead of it before anyone had to know. Nobody in that room moved. I was going to pay it back. I told myself that every single time. Mom looked at him for a long time. Her face wasn't angry. It was something past anger, the expression of a woman deciding very carefully what she was willing to spend the rest of her love on. You could have told me, she said. I would have given it to you. But you took my phone, you took my garden, you took 7 months of my life. She put her hand on his shoulder. You can't give that back, but you're still my son, and I don't know yet what I'm supposed to do with that. I walked up the 3 steps to the stage. I took off my jacket and laid it over her shoulders. She put her arm through mine. Scott came through the side door. He looked at my brother. My brother looked at him. I said, he'll go with you. It took 4 months to resolve, which is fast by any standard. The power of attorney document Mom had signed in February was reviewed by a capacity lawyer and found to have been executed while she was on a medication combination known to significantly affect comprehension and recall, something the signing attorney had failed to account for. The document was voided. The guardianship application was dismissed. The judge's written order included one sentence I've read more than once. The applicant has demonstrated a pattern of conduct consistent with the advancement of his personal financial interests rather than the well-being of the subject of the petition. My sister-in-law's real estate license was referred to the Real Estate Council of Ontario for disciplinary review. Listing a property as agent while holding power of attorney over the owner and standing to benefit from the sale is a conflict of interest under Ontario real estate law. Her license was suspended pending investigation. The forensic accounting came back at $62,000 withdrawn from Mom's RRSPs over 8 months. A civil order was entered for full repayment on a structured schedule. The criminal charge was financial exploitation of a vulnerable person under the Criminal Code of Canada. My brother entered a guilty plea. He received 18 months less a day, served in the community under strict conditions including full financial disclosure and no contact with Mom except by written letter, with her consent. His landscaping company folded in February. 6 employees lost their jobs, 2 of them in the worst month of the year for outdoor work in Ontario. I think about those 6 people. I don't think I could have done anything differently, but I think about them. The first time Mom and I were truly alone, no legal matter open, no one expected, nothing pending, was a Sunday in October, about 5 weeks after the Legion dinner. She'd put weight back on. There was color in her face. I'd been carrying a question for 3 years. We were at her kitchen table with coffees, and she pushed a half-finished crossword to one side to make room for the mugs. I asked it, Mom, were you angry with me for not making it back before Dad died? She put both hands around her mug and actually thought about it. Not performing consideration, genuinely considering. The way she'd always done before saying something she meant. Curtis, she said, your father died on a Thursday morning. You were in Sudbury on a job. She looked at me. I know what you were doing. You were doing what you were supposed to be doing. Your father would have told you to finish the job. You know that. I did know it. I'd always known it somewhere, but I'd let it be taken from me. Sean used it every single time, I said. She nodded slowly. I know he did, and I let him because I thought you knew the truth and I didn't want to make it into a larger thing than it was. She paused. I let you carry that for 3 years because I didn't want an argument. That wasn't fair. Some of that is mine to own. I hadn't expected her to say that. I didn't know what to say back, so I didn't say anything. We sat there with our coffees for a while. Before I left, she went to the kitchen junk drawer, the one with rubber bands and old takeout menus and a flashlight with dead batteries in it since I was 9 years old, and came back with a key on a plain ring, new-cut brass, still sharp at the edges. I had the locks changed, she said. This is yours. I reached into my jacket pocket and put the Muskoka key on the table between us, the orange electrical tape my father had put on it years ago still there. She looked at it for a moment. I kept it the whole time, I said. I never used it. She picked it up, turned it over, ran her thumb across the tape. I know, she said. I got your letter. She went to the bedroom and came back with the envelope, opened carefully, refolded. the crease worn soft at the fold line, the way paper gets when it's been opened and closed many times. She set it in front of me. I didn't need to read it, I knew what it said, but I looked at the paper anyway. I still have the Muskoka key, I'm not going to use it. I'll wait for you to open the door. She slid the new key back across the table toward me. I shook my head. Keep it. She looked at me. I'll ring the bell, I said. You decide whether to answer. She held the new key in both hands for a moment. Then she put it back in the junk drawer and left the old one on the table between us, and we finished our coffee. There's one thing I haven't told anyone until now. After the Legion dinner, after Scott had left with my brother, after Dr. Park was on her phone in the parking lot, I had a few minutes alone with Mom in the hall while everything outside was being sorted. Someone brought her a glass of water. She sat in one of the metal folding chairs near the stage, and I sat beside her. I asked her very quietly whether she'd gotten my letter. She took a sip of water. She set the glass on the floor beside her chair and looked at the photograph of my father still on the easel up on the stage. Sean brought it in with the rest of the mail, she said. He read the outside. He decided it was harmless. A pause. He gave it to me. Did you read it? I read it 41 times, she said. The same way she'd state the page number of a reference. A plain fact. I started counting after the 15th. I didn't say anything. When you wrote that you would wait for me to open the door, she said, that was the first time in 7 months someone had given me a choice. Everyone else was telling me things, telling me I was fine, telling me I didn't need my phone, telling me what I needed. She folded her hands in her lap. You wrote that you'd wait, that I would decide. She looked at me. I started planning that night, she said. The dinner was 3 weeks away. I needed 3 weeks. I've thought about that a lot. She wasn't waiting to be rescued. She was already moving. I just happened to arrive in time to hold the door. It's spring now. Mom turned 78 in March. We had a small gathering. My daughter Sylvia from down the street, a few women from her old library circle. One of them held on at the door for a long moment when she hugged Mom, and Mom just let her. She goes out every morning again. Some days it's just to stand on the back step with her coffee and look at what the winter left behind. Last Saturday, I came by at 9:30 and rang the bell, and she opened the door in her housecoat with the crossword tucked under her arm and said, 7 down 9 letters, means to take legal authority over another person's affairs. I sat down at the kitchen table. She slid the puzzle across to me, 2 pencils on top of it. I looked at the clue, then I looked up at her. I think I'd leave that one blank, I said. She laughed. She picked up her pencil and filled in the letters herself, deliberate and unhurried, then set the pencil down and looked out the window at the yard, where the first crocuses had just come through. Some mornings are like that now, quiet in a way that feels earned.